Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Quasex56, otherwise known as Will, and today I thought I would just walk you through my process of using After Effects specifically for green screening, and just kind of the process and methods I take to complete the goals, get over challenges, and just make, So today I have here in front of me a recording, roughly 2 hours of me working on a green screen. When I start a project, I'm inspired by some short video I find on YouTube, sometimes for my subscription feed, sometimes I see it being used in other memes. In this case, the one that I chose to record was this video Ricky Berwick posted on his YouTube channel early the same morning, and I thought, oh, this is perfect, this just came out, I'm gonna work on this right away. It was only a small segment of the full video, which had been posted to Instagram. A little embarrassing, but it is what it is. I think the cut is still pretty good, and I liked what I was able to do with it.
What the fuck? On a kid's show? Motherfucker, what are you thinking?
When I find a video I like, what I do is I copy over the link and I bring it into my plethora of downloaders that I have for YouTube. If anyone doesn't know, I do also do a significant amount of YouTube archival. So basically what that entails is me just downloading every single YouTube video I watch, every single creator I like, and archive it for the eventuality that it gets removed and the footage is lost, or in the eventuality of the death of the internet, and where I would just have to entertain myself offline. Terrifying stuff. But anyway, the one that I usually go to for quick stuff is loader.to. When you're looking at YouTube downloaders, though, they fluctuate, they disappear and reappear, so in the end it's best just to look one up yourself, see how it functions for you, see if it has everything you want. Obviously be cautious not to be scammed or leak your information. As always, I suggest a VPN. I personally use Nord. Not a sponsorship, but wouldn't that be lovely someday? So once you get it downloaded in the best quality possible, you're gonna just load up After Effects like I do and drop it in. So mostly what I do, I try to size up a clip or video just to see what I'm going to be doing, so I can kind of expect what my workflow is going to be, and so I can curb myself to sort of structure how I'm going to be tackling this. So for the footage that we have, it's very interesting, because what happens is it's a TV frame. I don't normally do TV frames. It's just not really my thing, just because I feel like it's too easy to conventionally do. No one needs this done. Most people just can do a simple 4-point mask and then it's over, I don't want to make stuff that is essentially just going to be a time save of 5 minutes for anyone that just started to use something like entry level like Vegas. It's not worth my time, and it probably wouldn't even be worth their time to download. So it's a great reaction in general, but it also is perfect because it so the first thing I thought of is I could just rotoscope him and just have him dropped into any situation or frame, as the green screen. But the problem with that is that he is at such an unusual angle to the TV that it just wouldn't work in a lot of edits, and it would be something that I would have a pet peeve with if I saw. So the situation here is if you crop out the TV, but do it fine enough so when Ricky crosses over the TV when he gives his reaction and intersects it, that it blends well enough that it seems to be a convincing green screen that it could believably be something he's watching, which, obviously makes it reusable, easy to use, effective, and fun and funny. So that's the only reason I took it on, is because it was a light challenge, and that kind of is exactly what I'm looking for. So the first thing I start out doing is I test that kind of 4-point mask like I was talking about, just to see how bad it would look if someone did a fast mask on it. I originally did a shape layer and then I switched it over to a mask, which is a thing you can do. You can copy the mask path or the pathing data from a solid, and it will take that geometry and put it on a mask path, which is part of the mask that goes on top of the image. So I did that and, fix that mistake. There's going to be quite a few mistakes through this, so if you're just kind of like following along in After Effects with me, I would suggest watch it one step through and make bullet points for yourself so you can cross them out instead of wasting your time doing the same stupid mistakes I did. The interesting part about this green screen, though, is that I couldn't use green. As you can see in the picture, there's a larger Shrek figurine and like a Shrek figure that are part of the frame and obviously make up a good portion of it. And there's also other green things dotted around the frame as well that would kind of mess it up. So for anyone that doesn't know, if you can't use green for a green screen mask or roto brush, the next go-to is blue. You'll see blue used in a lot of sci-fi movies behind the scenes. Star Wars, I know they default to blue a lot. But if the blue doesn't work like it does in this, because the whole wall is blue, so it would take the wall along with it if you tried to use it. Then the next, and this is I've only had to use the next one a few times, and it's very certain situations, like some nature stuff when there's water and greenery and plants, you have to default to red, which, is the third primary color, blah, blah, blah. I could get into color theory, but it doesn't fucking matter. So the next thing you have to do is default to kind of the secondary layer of colors, which I've never done before, and I assume the easiest to use would be the purple. Now, the purple appears nowhere in the frame. There's a few purple things on his TV stand. I assume they're games or something, or I don't know. I just call them blocks throughout my editing in my head. I said, I have to map around the blocks. But the thing is, they're distinctively muted enough where a fluorescent magenta wouldn't interfere with them. So I went with the purple. I actually do a stupid gag where I name it "Purple is my favorite color" at some point in the footage, just to throw in a SpongeBob reference. It's good to keep yourself interested in the footage, finding unique ways to kind of refresh it for yourself and keep yourself focused. One of the things I do, since I have two monitors, is I don't utilize it to better my editing. That would be cool, but I think it would just end up stressing me out and slowing me out more if I had to bounce back between two. In the past, I've used it as in After Effects, when I do 3D projects, I put another angle on the side, but for most projects, what I do is I just pull up SoundCloud and I just listen to all my poop and mega mix bullshit music, my terrible taste. So that kind of makes the time flow better for me, keeps me focused, and then keeps my animosity low, so I stay in depth in the project. But the next step after I did drop that initial mask on and put the purple background is I brought it into Vegas. So Vegas is kind of where I test all my green screens before I send them out, just to make sure I didn't make a glaring flaw and the playback looks fine and everything kind of checks out. So I just wanted to see how it looked in Vegas, how it looked in process, how it actually was removed from the frame and how genuine and good it looked. Because and not a lot of people are sensitive to this, but I really don't like small tears and stuff, and a lot of times I'll criticize my own work because of those small effects. And what I was running into when I was testing it out is there would be a highlighted red area around the region where the green screen was supposed to be, and when he actually went in over the green screen to the Scooby-Doo footage I put in, it would actually highlight him red too. So it was kind of a weird challenge to overcome, but I theorized that anyone using the base level Vegas would probably be able to get it looking semi-decent. Also, what I identified while editing in Vegas was I realized that the blocks definitely needed a second mask on them, and the kind of Shrek ear from the Shrek TV needed to be a little more refined, so it was a little more circular. I don't really like being super finicky with getting kind of rounded lines. I think it's just like gums up the process for me, but I know a lot of more professional rotoscopers and maskers do kind of use that, like, I think it's control click or something, and drag on the points of the mask to make it like kind of circular. So after that, after I do my test, I just have my After Effects still open, so I boot that back up and I start working on the mask added to the second mask. So this process can be a little fucky depending on how you do it, but basically what I did is I locked the other mask so I didn't touch it at all, didn't move it. That's a big problem I have when I'm working with multiple layers and shit, is accidentally moving the other one and spending the time to Control Z backwards. So I kind of guessed the geometry of the blocks on the TV stand. It's not great. A lot of times what you'll realize when you're doing these like intricate roto brushes and masks with like on this small of a scale, it can become like kind of pixel ghosty, where you're not 100% sure where things exactly are, where things blend, where things technically disappear, seemingly like a ghost. You know, it can be really shitty and annoying. Anyway, to my experience, I haven't really heard anyone talk about this kind of effect, and how it gets a little blurry and whatnot. So I just guess, you know, sometimes I have to go back and remask or re-rotobrush frames just because I miss out on like the little intricacies of it, and it's just like, oh god. But, you know, that's part of the process, learning from your mistakes, and next time you'll probably catch it before you get too far along. So I do my best to trace around the blocks and loop back around underneath so there's enough room, and then I keep the first mask on subtract and the second mask on add. When you get into like mask modes, it can get a little fucky just because it like you're dealing with like logics and stuff. So you kind of have to like double think yourself and like redo it a few times to see how it works. Or maybe I'm just small brain, I don't know. But yeah, it looks like I figured it out, and I was a little unhappy with how it was looking. What I did was I was moving through the clip to see if there was any colors changing, and basically the whole block segment, the color was changing over and over again. So there was like too much bleed from the actual TV image onto the blocks, and a lot of this just came from the light shifting on the TV. You can't get out all of it, but you can do your best to mitigate it. So that means chopping off the blocks a little bit. You know, obviously you don't want to do that because then it's like, what's the point of this then? It just looks like a straight line again. But sometimes that's what you have to do. So what I did was I messed with the kind of feathering of it and just kind of transforming it and loosening it up and the opacity, and eventually I got a pretty good middle ground that I was happy with, but obviously there was still stuff going on. So I tried moving around the mask. That usually doesn't work because orientation is a bitch. Like, you have this orientation point, and the rest of the object doesn't move like you want it to. It doesn't keep the same form. That goes with scaling too. That can get a little fucky, which I try to use later, which it never works out. If you think you can fix something by scaling it, not in a lot of these situations. But what I end up doing, let me see if I can figure it out, is going through, like I said, and reworking the points of the second mask. Just seeing those like bright points, which I kind of honed in on like the white light that was appearing off the glare of the TV. And I just did little edits just to like teeter out those. And I got it pretty good. I just compared it a few times and ran it back to make sure it looked like a good edit. And then I start making a few mistakes. In summary, what I ended up doing was I had to rotoscope Ricky. You know, he needed to appear over the TV, and the method I was doing was actually super not effective. What I basically was grasping at straws, like screaming and yelling, trying to figure out the best way to get around this. If I had to give myself any advice when I started this, though, it would be to focus on the area that's intersecting the TV. Don't focus on anything else, because that's just undue work through the Rotoshop. It is not worth the time. So, what I ended up doing was, at the end, I threw away a lot of the work I did, and I just literally took an image capture. You know, sometimes the best green screen is just an image. Like, if there is nothing happening in the reaction, and it's just body movement and, like, blank staring, it's not really worth it, is it? So, if you're focused on the subject, which is going to be in the green screen, it's fine to have an image, in my opinion. You can get fancy with it, and you can, like, animate some artificial breathing just to get around that way, but, like, you don't have many amazing options, you know? Like, the scaling did not function. You know, I thought I could scale a second version of the video over the first and then roto brush it, but then you're like seeing like twin strands of hair and it just looks really bleh bleh. If you want to see a good example of that and want to dive into like some problems that can pop up with that, you can look at my video, Iwata opens the wrong door. That was when I got in on the shorts system and was able to get like 16,000 views. And I feel really bad because it got to the point where I was like so in depth trying to make that like transparency and like scale, and it was just bad. It looked like you were having like it looked like your vision was going blurry and you're seeing like two of them slightly. Now this is something that bothers me, but I know it might not be technically noticeable to everyone else, so that might just be my pet peeve. That might not even be something you care about, so sure, if that's the solution for you, go ahead. But anyway, I restarted it. I went all the way down to the point where he opens his mouth and reacts to it, and then eventually turns, points his hands, and says the line, "What the fuck?" So I clipped it down as small as I could, and then what I did was I did a double opacity shift, you know, just kind of like a blend. So like one comes in, the other fades out. And I got it to look pretty smooth for the most part, mostly because there wasn't that much movement to begin with, so it wasn't too jarring and noticeable. Yeah, and then I messed around a little bit more just to kind of get it right through some more layers and shit. I can explain that in a second, but to get back what I was doing with the roto brush, this is another pitfall that can happen. Roto brush is essentially worthless if you don't have a good enough computer. It sucks, and it's unfortunate that video editing is still like gate kept like this by price, you know, especially with how fucky graphics card prices are. But I'm lucky enough to have a 2070 Ti and a pretty good computer set to go with it, so I'm able to use Roto Brush to a point. Now this is the interesting part. I've tried to optimize as much as I could, and at one point I even clear my cache to try to get it to load a little quicker, but it wasn't really working. Because what can happen is if you have so many edits and you have to fix something over and over again and the shot's complicated as you're like drawing the outline over and over again and trying to get it to be exact, is it starts loading for infinite amount of time. Like it gets exponential. I'm talking like an hour for a frame, so it's just not feasible to edit at that point, let alone like freeze it when you're done and render it. So what I have to do is I usually cut up clips into segments of like 5 seconds or 2 seconds, just so I just create a clean roto brush and it's not bogging down the system and the last bit is frozen, so I can move forward to the next. I know there is a system in place to do that in the same clip and not have to like copy and paste a new clip. If anyone can tell me, I have been trying to figure it out for a while. That would save me a lot of time, so please get back to me if you know how to do that to make another reference frame in the middle of a clip to start rendering and facticulating from that new point. But anyway, another thing that kind of trips me up sometimes is there is two settings. Okay. Yeah, so there's two settings in the roto brush that kind of like vastly change how it functions. There is standard quality and best quality. Obviously, best is going to be a lot more pickier and it's going to be a lot more resource intensive. So depending on what type of project it is, it could make shit worse. I tried using standard, but I kept on having to like redo the glasses and redo the nose that it became not worth it. So turns out I switched to best. Works perfectly, like a dream. And that's kind of something you just have to test as you're working, whatever works for you and your system better. As you're getting better at using RotoBrush and you're creating more green screens, you're gonna want to do a lot more finer details. So one of the things I love to do, and I think it adds a lot more quality, is use the Refine Edge tool, which if you don't know, you just long click on the RotoBrush tool at the top, and then it pops up and you can switch to Refined Edge. So that works the same as the RotoBrush tool. You just draw over the bits you want to distinguish, but instead you draw over the lines between what you want to distinguish. So the bits you don't want in the screen that keep popping up, and the bits that you do want to be popping up but keep on disappearing. In most cases, you're going to be using this for hair. That's kind of like the meta of it, is like hair and just like fabric sometimes, just to get that fuzziness or the hairiness. In this, it's interesting because it's the first time I've used it on a beard and mustache, which is pretty funny. At one point it does fuck up though. I don't know if it's just as like fucking cut, but it was bothering me so much at the end because I was clipping a little bit and the frame of the TV was actually like jutting through his head at one point. It was bothering me so much. But once I got done drawing all the frames for the RotoBrush and the Refine tool and double checking it, making sure everything was flowing, I got caught up a few times on his glasses disappearing and then his hands not showing up. It's really just like checking over and finding the biggest problem first and working at that. Because if you don't do the biggest shit first and you're going back to do the big shit after you do the small shit, that's like so much more rendering and so much redoing that happens. So you really want to start from the beginning and keep going and find the biggest problems first and fixate on them. There's going to be small problems at the end. That's always going to happen and you're going to have to go back and do them, but that's my advice. Focus on the big problems first. One of the small problems I ran into was his hand was going through the TV frame and it was showing through the TV through inside of his hand between his pointer and his thumb. So what I actually had to do there is use the Refined Edge tool inside of the hand and like do my best to crop, like kind of, get around it and distinctify it. It can be a little finicky when you're doing like weird stuff like that where it's just like a hole between an arm, hole between a leg, or just like small gaps. It gets really finicky and it can look really, really bad, but I assure you, just keep working at it and it will make the difference. It will make stuff pop if you remove all those little details and fix it up. I know it's frustrating and hard and you'll end up doing every single frame by hand, but it can turn out really good. Or it can be very fuzzy and flashy and just jitter a lot. Luckily, RotoBrush comes with a lot of tools to fix that. One of the things I use a lot is Decontaminate Edge colors, which like removes like unnecessary edges onto the RotoBrush path, which can happen with the sides of people's shirts and just like when they're popping against a bright background. Shatter reduction. Feathering, like I've said before. Sometimes I use Shift Edge negative, just pulling it over the -%, and that adds a lot of quality. But yeah, so eventually I get Ricky looking like I like him to be, all good and shit. I guess to explain more of what I was doing with the fucking layers, which it's the same logic I said about the mask. It's just really like writing out fucking logic in your head. Like, this has to be above this has to be above that. So it looks like Let me just skip to the end to see what I end with. Okay, right, yeah. So to explain the layers that I have on the end, the first thing I have is the shape layer that goes on top. What I did for that is at the last second, there's a little misshapenness on his hand, and I was being lazy and I didn't want to unfreeze the roto brush just to fix that one frame, especially since it's towards the end, because then that's like re-rationalizing the whole clip, and like I said before, that's not fun. The second layer, which is the first video clip, is an overlay that I had to do a redo of the roto brush because there was a little glitchiness happening with his nose that I didn't like the look of. So if that wasn't there, his nose kind of gets chopped off, and once again, I didn't want to redo the roto brush and unfreeze it. Of course, that makes the third layer the second half of the roto brush. Like I was saying before, I usually segment it into 5 seconds so that it's not as intense to render it and it doesn't have to re-rationalize every single frame just to give it a break and just to have a new reference frame. Again, if someone could figure out how to combine that, I would be very happy and it would save me a lot of time. The fifth frame is the static image that fades out. I just didn't bother to stretch it to the point where I needed it to, and just left it the way it is because it just faded out anyway. And after that, I have the base level video of Ricky, and I have a mask put over that, so it's only showing the stuff behind Ricky that normally would look a little weird and bleedy, and that makes it so I don't have to worry about the rotoscope of Ricky going over it and like making weird blemishes and stuff. What I didn't realize though is, looking at it afterwards, you can clearly see the fucking mask there, like on the wall. It's definitely bleeding and like the light shifts and shit, and it just looks fucking gross. But that was my way of getting around doing more work and doing a better roto brush job. It's all about finding little ways around shit, and I'm not the best at explaining it, but this is my process, so whatever. The last image, layer 7, the fuck is that? Right, so the reaction image 7 is the original image again, re-put in to work with the video layer 6, so it fills up the other side of the frame and it can be static instead of dynamic with a video, which would cause a bunch of issues with a roto brush again. The logical systems involved with problem solving this can be really frustrating, and that's why I thought this would be an interesting video to talk about, just because there's so many layers of problems with it that I kind of had to get like last minute solutions to. And then of course, the last image is the purple solid that's kind of like in the background where, like, you know, the roto brush shows to, or the mask shows to. That's the background, that's what you remove. It's actually worthless in this, and I couldn't have gotten rid of it because everything else is just image. Like the image of the TV is in front of the purple, so it's kind of pointless. I'm really bad at cleaning up my project files just because I usually chug through shit in one sitting, so it doesn't really matter to me. So I could clean up a lot, and I'd welcome any criticism to get me better at it. But so yeah, once I got done with all that, I just watched through it extensively again just to see what I was doing wrong and to see if there was any clipping. I ended up being happy with it. It was just like the last thing I fixed was the hand that pops in, and like I said, there was a point with his chin and his beard where it looks like the TV's kind of going through his face, where I just kind of said fuck it and like didn't fix it. It's like half a second, but it like is really blotchy and it's kind of hard to see if you're not like looking for it. So I just decided it was fine. So then I threw it into Vegas again, you know, lowest end effort, the green screen, and just made sure it worked and it wasn't too jarring. There was some of the red bleed, but I got rid of the most of it by testing and stuff. So it's like anyone can do that. I understand it's a little extra effort to green screen out purple, but like I'm still saving you like 2 hours, and that's assuming that you can have the same processes that I have. So yeah, not to condescend or anything. But anyway, this is just me explaining the green screen because I know it's kind of... I think it needs to be demystified because it's not technically hard. It's really just problem solving and learning. Whenever there's an effect that I need to do or I'm running into an issue, I sometimes just look it up and watch a video, put it on 2x speed, follow it, and then I have that skill. And I think a lot of people are opposed to that. They're too scared to do this type of thing. And I want to demystify it, you know? Like, sure, I won't have job security if everyone knows how to efficiently roto brush and mask and layer frames and blah blah blah, but I think the creativity that can come out of it would be really great if this was just a conventional thing that everyone could do. And I also just wanted like people to peek into like what's going on, what am I doing. Didn't do the best job of explaining it, but you know, this isn't a tutorial. This isn't a tutorial. This is just like my stapled together version. So I hope you got something out of it. Glad we could be closer, I guess. All right, bye.